New Balance Hoops is changing the game with a roster built for the future. Aaron Nesmith, Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine. Cooper Flagg is the newest NBA draft pick, and Cam Brink, who's raising the bar for women's basketball. Whether it's the Hezzy V2 for quick cuts, the two-way V5 for all-around play, or the Kawhi 4 for those who never stop climbing, New Balance Hoops makes shoes built for every player. Visit newbalance.com/basketball to explore more.
This is an ad by Regain Couples Therapy and features real testimonials.
This was our first time trying therapy, and honestly, it was long overdue. Looking back, we just wish we had started sooner.
Regain's qualified therapists help couples when they can't get there on their own.
We thought it was intimacy issues, but Andrea helped us uncover a deeper root cause we hadn't even realized was there.
Visit regain.com/couplespod to get 10% off your first month. Regain, powered by BetterHelp.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Big XII Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast. So we're taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to talk with him a lot about the Big 12. He's a man that does the Ryan and Rush show, which that's based all around West Virginia athletics, so we do have to discuss that. We're also going to be discussing with him what he's all evaluating with UMass going on over to the MAC as we've got a lot of conference realignment, and heck, I lost track of it for a second or two myself, so there's that aspect of things, and we're going to try to get his perspective on a few teams that he's a little bit bullish/bearish on as well for the upcoming season. He always provides such great insight, so going to be great to be able to get Ryan on board today, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larsium, name does not matter, so per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they're making sure that bettors are able to access their funds in whatever way that they want, whenever and wherever, that all gambling transactions are approved 100% of the time. When you go to EdgeBoost.bet, make sure you utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That's going to get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. And additionally, with Ryan, we're going to be leading things off by talking about Grand Canyon and the fact that they were pretty much kicked out of the WAC, and now they're going to be in the Mountain West for this upcoming season. That's really the big piece of news that we've seen in college basketball over the last, we're going to call it week or two. The transfer portal has very much died down. The hay is relatively in the barn for most of these teams and the rosters that we're going to be getting for this upcoming season. So we're going to be chatting about that and so much more. For Ryan, he does amazing work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and additionally, he does that show that I was mentioning before, the Ryan and Rush show. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Moneyline_Max, MAC. And Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me, Greg. Dog days of summer, but we'll be in November before you know it.
Absolutely. And even in the dog days of summer, we are starting to see a little bit of news come out as this I thought was very interesting. Grand Canyon essentially got barred from the WAC. It felt like the WAC was just like, all right, you guys are just dominating us too much. You're leaving anyway. How about if we just rip the Band-Aid off right now and leave you hanging? But I mean, they were not left hanging for very long. The Mountain West has decided to shelter them in for this upcoming season. How do you take a look at things for both the WAC and Grand Canyon? Because I think the Grand Canyon can be able to go out there and compete right away in the Mountain West. Maybe not win the conference, but I think that they could be like a top 4, top 5 team.
I agree, Greg. I mean, Grand Canyon, last couple of years, winners of 50 games in 2 years. They won an NCAA tournament game. They had a tough one this year, but I mean, they are a good enough program from athletically, size-wise. Bryce Drew does a good job with the transfer portal. And I think he'll be able to get some guys in that will equate to the Mountain West talent level. I mean, this is going to be an electric final year in the Mountain West. It kind of sucks. Actually, not kind of. It does suck that we're not going to see the old Mountain West after this year.
I was about to say, we're still going to have the Mountain West. It is very much not the same Mountain West, and we've got the Pac-12 back, but I think that is going to be really interesting to see what we get out of the Pac-12 next year, because you obviously have Gonzaga coming in, sort of like a mismatch of the Mountain West teams. Obviously, those two teams that were barred from the Pac-12 and Washington State and Oregon State, and I think that just the West Coast landscape in college basketball is going to be looking very different over the next 12 months, and with the WAC, I think that it might be becoming a little bit more of a conference that, even though it has Western in the name, it might be a little bit more of a Southern conference.
Yeah, I mean, the names mean nothing anymore. The Big 12's got 16, the Big 10's got 18. Pac-12, I don't even know how many teams are in that one now.
At some point, the Big East might be having a team out there in, like, Hawaii.
Exactly. Geographic makes no sense. It's coast to coast, and everybody's just chasing the bag at this point.
Yep, they certainly are, and that's this day and age of college basketball. And if you could get the money, take the money. I will never hate on the people that are able to get the bag, but at the same time, it very much is what it is. As joining me on the show, a man that I'm sure is getting a tremendous bag, that would be Ryan McIntyre. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ryan, part of why I love you so much is that you do a great job with the Ryan and Rush show. That's all about West Virginia athletics, and obviously you're doing a great job of being able to evaluate the Big 12, a conference that over the last few years we've seen a lot of change over there. And how do you take a look at this conference for the upcoming season? Because I think that it's very clear that the big bad wolf out there is going to be Houston. Houston just very rock solid. A lot of places have them as a top 2, top 3 team in all of college basketball coming into the season, and it's hard to argue there, but I do still think that the other top teams like Arizona, Iowa State, while they might not be quite as amazing as they were a season ago, I look at these two teams along with BYU as being really strong competitors and keeping the Big 12 as one of the marquee conferences in all of college basketball.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Houston's the class of the league. They've done such a good job since coming to the Big 12 of elevating their brand and using that Big 12 brand to attract even more talent. Talent was never an issue, but it feels like they're able to retain it. Their NIL's in a good spot. Kelvin Sampson's an elite future Hall of Fame coach. And just being able to retain their roster has put them, in my opinion, they should be preseason number 1. I know Kansas is getting a lot of kind of hate this offseason, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think they're kind of flying under the radar. Over the years, sometimes some of their less hyped teams have been some of the more together and better teams, and maybe Bill Self was throwing money left and right at people, and the pieces never fit together. So I think Kansas will bounce back, be a top 4 team. Iowa State under Otzelberger, defensively, they have such a great identity. Baylor, they're going to be kind of a mystery team as well. Arizona, I think, as well, will be super talented. But I also think BYU, what they've been able to do with their NIL package, getting the number 1 player in the country from the high school ranks, and then also just bringing over guys like Rob Wright from Baylor. I think they're going to be really good. And then K-State, can they jump up after a couple disappointing years? And hopefully my Mountaineers as well can be in the middle of the pack and get back to an NCAA tournament.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that the team of intrigue is the Cincinnati Bearcats, because for Wes Miller, I've had great expectations for him, and I think that he's a heck of a coach, but it just hasn't happened for him here at Cincinnati quite yet. There's been a lot of fumbles with regards to late in the season when they've been on the bubble and things have slipped away. Like they had a great non-conference slate last season, albeit against a very, very shaky schedule, to say the least, but I look at them having Mustafa Thiem coming on over from UCF. They've got Day Thomas, Jizzle James in that backcourt. And if they don't make it to the NCAA tournament this year with the experience of Kirk Kriisa, I don't know when they will.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge year. I mean, I think it's an understatement to say he's on the hot seat. They have underachieved here over the last couple of years. Last year was really disappointing. There was no excuse that that team with all those veteran pieces shouldn't have got to an NCAA tournament. But you mentioned it, the big fella coming over, Thiem coming over from UCF. They also got Celestine coming over from Baylor. They got Baba Miller coming over from FAU. So they got some pieces coming in. Offensively, they have just been such a mystery team and just struggle to score the basketball at times in Big 12 play.
Yep, they certainly have been. And I mean, it's, to your point, not an issue of the defense. The defense has been very rock solid, but that offense, it's been needing a little bit of work. And I do think that they're going to be one of the big question marks in this conference. And then I was mentioning Mustafa Thiem and the fact that he's coming on over from Central Florida. And I think that they're another team of intrigue because Central Florida had some nice triumphs last year. Like they started off the year winning against Texas A&M when they were shorthanded, but then things went down the toilet bowl. And I honestly look at the roster here, having the likes of John Bull, Riley Kugel, Jermichael Stillwell, the talent feels like it's here, but at the same time for Central Florida, I just don't know if I can buy it because it just feels like Johnny Dawkins has really underachieved since he lost, 7'6" Taco Fall.
Yeah, and also they got guys like B.J. Freeman coming in, Devon Cambridge, and Chris Parker from Villanova. So they got guys that look the part. And UCF and Cincinnati, honestly, have been very similar, kind of around that 7-11 range in the Big 12 back-to-back years. Cincinnati just is the one that's had all the expectations. UCF's been more under the radar. I would imagine, just like Cincinnati, more of the same from UCF, hover around that bubble. Both of those teams, I think, got to get on the right side of some of these 1 to 2 possession games so that they can get close to 500. And if you can get to 500 in the Big 12, have no bad losses in the non-con, you can get to the big dance.
Yep, and I've noticed that in the past, both of these teams have had, shall we say, a little bit of suspect non-conference schedules as well. So they better be able to win those games as well. As we do have joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, Ryan McIntyre does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And just taking a look across the conference, I know you were talking about Kansas getting a little bit too much hate, but how about if we take a look at the team in the Little Apple in Kansas State? Because I think that they're just such a big mystery because they've been throwing out all that NIL money. It felt like they really weren't going to land that big fish until PJ Haggerty fell into their lap, so that becomes their primary scorer. But how do you take a look at a bunch that they're going to be relying upon a bunch of mid-major guys like Abdi Bashir, who was rock solid over at Monmouth, but at a lower level, Marcus Johnson, who I loved over at Bowling Green. I guess you could call him like a Glenn Big Baby Davis 2.0. He's sort of like a Bartolo Colon of college basketball, in which he's a bigger guy, but you know what? He's got some nimble moves. That said, I take a look at this Kansas State team, and I do think that this is going to be a big, giant put-up or shut-up year for Jerome Tang, because I think that it's becoming a little bit of a case where perhaps that year number one was a little bit more of the outlier rather than the norm.
Yeah, it started to feel like that was a one-hit wonder. It was a special year getting to the Elite Eight, but yeah, they got some missing pieces. They pull off the trade Doug McDaniel for PJ Haggerty with Memphis, so interested to see how they both fit. I also think Nate Johnson from Akron's a nice get. I don't know how I feel about taking all these mid-major guys, but I do like that they're coming from good, relatively winning programs for the most part, so I think winning does translate. I think Kansas State finds himself back in the NCAA tournament next year.
Yep, and I think that it's going to be needing to be an NCAA tournament bid for them, or else Jerome Tang, he might be looking for a job elsewhere. The pressure is certainly on there. And when it comes to this conference, is there a team out there that you feel like might either surprise or disappoint, and you're just feeling a little bit higher/lower on them right now?
I'll go to Texas Tech. I just can't say enough good things about Grant McCasland. I know they lost Darian Williams to NC State. He's going over there with Will Wade, but it just feels like this team always has a plan, and they identify what they want and need in the portal year after year. Being able to get Toppin back, I thought was huge. I like bringing over Donovan Atwell, also from UNC Greensboro, Lawan Watts over from Wazoo. They do a really good job of identifying what they need and getting those pieces. And I just think Texas Tech will be, once again, have a lot of length. I mean, the kid from VCU as well, Bomboy, I think he's going to have a good year. He's going to be a good fit there. I just think that the pieces are going to fit once again well in Lubbock, and I would imagine Grant McCasland, I don't know if they'll be as good as last year because the Elite Eight should have been in the Final Four and maybe would have won it all because they had Florida beat, but I would imagine they will be a second weekend team once again.
Yep, with Texas Tech, Graham McCasland has done such a good job of being able to elevate that program. And I mean, expectations were high when he came in, and he's been able to, at the very least, meet the hype, if not exceed the hype. So I've been very impressed there. And I'm impressed by the background that we have with our guest, Ryan McIntyre, as he used to be a part of Frank Martin's coaching staff with UMass. They were a part of the Atlantic 10 last year. They're going to be in the MAC this year. We're going to talk about that transition, and we're going to talk with him about a few teams that he's bullish/bearish on as well for the upcoming season, and that'll be on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast.
This is an ad by Regain Couples Therapy. Let's be honest, loving your partner doesn't mean you always like them, and guess what? That's normal. Regain offers couples therapy that's flexible, affordable, and 100% online. Whether you're reconnecting or working through conflict, Regain is here to support you both. See why people wish they'd tried couples therapy sooner. Visit regain.com/couplespod to get 10% off your first month. That's regain.com/couplespod.
And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by our guy, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. You're able to follow him on Twitter /X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled MAC. Ryan does such an amazing job being able to gauge this game of college basketball, and he actually used to be a graduate assistant when he was over at South Carolina under Frank Martin's coaching staff, and as we know with UMass, they spent a very long time out there in the Atlantic 10. Now they head on over to the MAC, and I do think that this is going to be a very interesting transition. How do you take a look at this UMass team, and one that had their struggles in the Atlantic 10, now will be finding themselves in the MAC this year?
Yeah, they are in the MAC. I would think that they're going to be at the top of the MAC, to be honest. I think athletically, size-wise, they've done a good job. This is year 4 of Frank. And usually year 4, 5, and 6 have been his best years. He still builds a program the old school way, develops guys. I know it's harder in this day and age, but them going to the MAC kind of translates to an older school program, other than just having their players rated by the portal year in and year out. But I'm looking forward to Minutemen. I think they're going to be a top-tier team in the MAC.
Yep, and I do think that it is so interesting going from the MAC to the Atlantic 10, because the MAC used to be one of those premier mid-major leagues. They've never been really on par with the Atlantic 10. With the Atlantic 10, I still remember like a decade ago when they got 4+ teams into the NCAA tournament. That's never really been the MAC, but I do think that the, shall we say, step down in competition is really going to serve them well, because I just take a look at the MAC, and the directional Michigan and the directional Illinois schools have been less than tremendous, to say the least. I actually feel relatively okay about Ball State. I think that they're building something, but I mean, it just feels like a MAC that has been really ravaged by the transfer portal in recent years, and while there have been some mid-majors that have really benefited from NIL and the changing landscape, I feel like the MAC has been one of those conferences that has really taken a step down as a result.
It's still run by the Ohio schools for the most part: Akron, Kent, Toledo, and Ohio, the Bobcats. I like the coaches in that league. I think that they all do just a tremendous job, whether it's Jeff Bowles at Ohio or Rob Senderoff at Kent State or John Gross at Akron, Coach K over there, the other Coach K at Toledo. It's really a coach's league. And Frank, I think, over at UMass, having a guy that's been to a Final Four, it's really guys that have been around the block and been to multiple NCAA tournaments. So the talent has dropped off, but I think that the competitiveness and the coaching is still as high as ever.
Yep, the coaching certainly is. I'm right there with you. Jeff Bowles, and I think that he does a rock-solid job, and you recall a few years ago, got Ohio to an NCAA tournament win, and who knows if Ohio, many, many years ago, actually knocks off North Carolina, makes it to that Elite Eight. Oh, man, that would have been so big for the conference, and it's one of those, if fifths were fifths, we would all be drunk sort of situations, but I would have loved to have seen that. And for the Atlantic 10, they do lose UMass, and I don't think that's too big of a loss, because let's call it what it is. The Atlantic 10 had way more than 10 teams, so they weren't living up to their name, just like the Big Ten now has 18 teams. So hopefully we can balance that out a little bit. But I do think that the Atlantic 10 is going to be such an intriguing conference, because every single year it feels like there's like 3 or 4 teams that have the propensity to make the NCAA tournament, but they only get like 1 or 2 bids, because everyone else, for lack of a better term, just poaches each other. They beat each other up within the conference, and it's going to be interesting to see if those top teams can avoid bad losses.
It's hard to win on the road in that league. I think that's the main point, because you look at it, the top teams like VCU and Dayton, they have electric home court advantages. The Bonnies has always been a tough place to win. Rhode Island's a tough place to win. George Mason now with Tony Skinn, they're getting better and better. Richmond with Chris Mooney, that's also a difficult place to win. So, and then the Philly schools. I mean, the travel spots are hard. The coaching is really good in that league too. I'm looking forward to seeing Phil Martelli Jr. take over VCU. Anthony Grant always does a great job at dating year in, year out. I think it's a lot of parity once again in the Atlantic 10, which, to your point, probably only results in them having 2, maybe at the most 3 teams.
Yeah, it's going to be a very intriguing league in general, and I do feel really good about VCU. You mentioned Martelli Jr., and I think that he's going to be able to do a nice job of elevating this program, and I think the one program that I have my question marks with is Dayton, because they've been one of the creme de la creme schools out there in the Atlantic 10, but I just felt like they needed to do a little bit more in the transfer portal this offseason, and I feel like maybe there was a little bit of hesitation after last offseason. They brought in Zed Key and Posh Alexander, and it just felt like they didn't get bang for their buck out of two guys that were starters at the power conference level and really never materialized for them last year.
I agree. They've been taking chances on guys that are coming off injuries from the power level, and it just hasn't translated. And I know Dayton fans are frustrated a little bit with Anthony Grant just because they have not had the postseason success, unfortunately. And it really does suck for Dayton fans because their year was the year that it got canceled in 2020. They were going to be a 1 seed. They could have got to the Final Four, and who knows what we would be talking about with the Dayton Flyers if that came to fruition. But, yeah, they've had some missed opportunities, got them bounced back-to-back 3 straight years early in the Atlantic 10 tournament before they were projected to do so. So a little bit underwhelmed with the roster so far coming in, but maybe sometimes that's a good thing, flying under the radar and the team buys in and plays hard for one another.
Yep, absolutely. I'm right there with you. I really feel for the fans of the Atlantic 10, and I really feel for those Dayton fans, of which it looked like they were going to be able to excel. It looked like they were going to have that big run in March, but it just never turned out to be. But we always have a great run on this podcast when we're talking to you, Ryan, and I do want to give you the floor once again because I always love to do this with you. Is there a team or two that over the last few weeks that you've been identifying that you just are feeling either a little bit more bullish / bearish on them, and you're just thinking that perhaps there's other people out there that are off on them, whether that be to the positive or the negative?
I think I'm going to go to the Big East, and I know that St. John's is losing a lot, but I do like the pieces that they've been able to bring in. I mean, when you lose the Big East Player of the Year, who, by the way, should have came back to school, it's a different discussion, but I like the pieces. I like the guards that they've been able to bring in, whether it's Dylan Mitchell coming over from Cincinnati. They also got Ian Jackson coming over from Carolina and Sellers coming over from Stanford. And I just think that these pieces under Rick Pitino will mesh once again. And I think they're going to really be able to make shots with those guys that they're bringing in the portal. And then Bryce Hopkins, of course, is the big X factor. And Sandin from Arizona State, I thought he popped his freshman year. So if Bryce Hopkins can return to the level of what he was a couple years ago as a Big East Player of the Year candidate, him and Big Z in the middle, I think St. John's is a Final Four contender.
Yep, I think that St. John's is in for a big year. I think that's they and UConn, or the creme de la creme out there in the Big East. And the creme de la creme when it comes to making great appearances on this podcast is you, my friend. Ryan, you're doing such a great job of valuing this game of college basketball. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I appreciate it, Greg. Yes, go check us out at the College Experience. We got football going on right now. We're halfway through 136 team previews, and then we'll flip it over to all our conference basketball previews, as well as our coaches tour in the fall. So go check us out all year long over at the College Experience with Colby, Dan, and myself.
So much good stuff over there at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and our good friend Ryan does a great job, along with Kobe, of being able to break it all down. So a big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry ZM, naming does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like here on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. That means I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you.
New Balance Hoops is changing the game with a roster built for the future. Aaron Nesmith, Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine, Cooper Flagg is the newest NBA draft pick, and Cam Brink, who's raising the bar for women's basketball. Whether it's the Hezi Low V2 for quick cuts, the two-way V5 for all-around play, or the Kawhi 4 for those who never stop climbing, New Balance Hoops makes shoes built for every player. Visit newbalance.com/basketball to explore more.
This is an ad by Regain Couples Therapy and features real testimonials.
This was our first time trying therapy, and honestly, it was long overdue. Looking back, we just wish we had started sooner.
Regain's qualified therapists help couples when they can't get there on their own.
We thought it was intimacy issues, but Andrea helped us uncover a deeper root cause we hadn't even realized was there.
Visit regain.com/couplespod to get 10% off your first month. Regain, couples therapy that works.